Hi everyone, it's Laura here for SugarPea Designs, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make an Easter card using products from the February 2019 release. I started off by die cutting a panel out of some Bristol Smooth cardstock by Strathmore using the rectangle die in the Card Front Element Builder dies by SugarPea Designs. This left me with an A2 rectangle with a stitched detail all around, over which I am going to do some ink blending with distress oxides. I am going for a gradient effect on the orange tones, and for that I decided to use Scattered Straw, Wild Honey and Rusty Inch. I am blending my inks using some foam blenders. These are round foam blenders by Ranger, and I am blending my inks starting from the edges of the paper and moving my way towards the inside so that I don't get harsh lines. In order to add some shimmer to this panel, I decided to come in with some Perfect Pearls. These ones are in the color Perfect Copper, and I am applying them with a brush all over the panel. I buffed off the excess in the areas where I had a little bit too much build up, and here I was trying to show what a nice shimmer you get when using Perfect Pearls. I also decided to add a little bit more interest to the panel, so I first spritzed some water from a distress sprayer. I let it reactivate the inks, and then I blotted off the excess with my cloth. And then I also diluted some more of that Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Copper and used a brush to create some droplets, and this will add color and shimmer to the panel. Because I liked this droplet effect a lot, I decided to add some more with the same distress oxides that I had used for my ink blending. Actually, I skipped the Rusty Inch, so I created some droplets with Scattered Straw and with Wild Honey. And once I was done, I cleaned off my work surface and I set this panel aside to dry. Next, I moved on to my second distress oxide background, and for this I used shades of purple. I used Nude Lavender, Shaded Lilac and Dusty Concord, and I used a different technique to add color to the panel. I swiped my distress oxides on the glass mat, I spritzed them with water, and then I came with my panel face down on the inks and picked up the color. And because the glass mat is a sleek surface, I get almost a watercolor look where the distress oxides flow into each other. I sped up the drying process with a heat tool, and then I decided that I wanted a little bit more of that Nude Lavender in my background, so I smooshed it onto my glass mat, activated it with water, and again placed my panel face down onto the ink. I am using my heat gun to speed up the drying process, and like I did for the other background, I decided to add some droplets. So I used Nude Lavender, Shaded Lilac and Dusty Concord. I smooshed each of them onto the glass mat, activated them with water, and then created the droplets with a paintbrush. I set that panel aside to dry, and then I started doing die cutting. Today's card is with die cuts only, so there isn't any coloring or any stamped images. And the die that I'm using right now to cut a window in my orange ink blended panel is the new Egg Cutaway Window die by SugarPea Designs. This was released in February 2019 and it's absolutely gorgeous with all those intricate details all around the window. I am trying to remove the central part of my window without breaking any of those delicate branches. And this takes a little bit of attention, but it's not hard to do at all because the die cuts really nicely. Next, I used the Easter Word die to die cut some black cardstock, And at this point I wasn't sure that I was liking the contrast between my soft background and the dark sentiment die cut, so I moved on and used the bunny die in the egg cutaway window die by SugarPea Designs to die cut 5 bunnies out of some more Bristol Smooth cardstock by Strathmore. And to create the illusion of dimension and add a little bit of shading, I blended Distress Oxide in pumice stone on the edges of each of the 5 bunnies. And to increase the contrast even more, I added just a tiny little bit of Distress Oxide in black soot to the right part of the bunnies and blended that out again with pumice stone. At this point, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of shimmer to my purple background as well. So I used Perfect Pearls, this time in the color Perfect Pearl. I diluted them with water and added some droplets with a paintbrush and put this background aside to dry. For the sentiment, because I didn't like the stark contrast between the black die-cut sentiment and my soft ink blended panels, I decided to go for some greens. I am creating an ombre effect with forest moss, bundled sage and shabby shutters distress oxides, and I'm going to die cut the word Easter out of this ink blended panel. Like I did for all the other elements in this card, I'm going to add some droplets, again using the same colors of Distress Oxides, smooshing them on my glass mat, activating them with water, and then picking them up with a paintbrush that I'm going to use to create the droplets. I made sure that the panel was completely dry and then went ahead and used my Sidekick machine and the Easter word die by SugarPea Designs to die cut the word Easter out of this panel. Now, because this was a little bit too light and was getting lost against the background, I decided to create a drop shadow effect with the black die cut word Easter. So I went ahead and glued the 2 die cuts together, shifting them a little bit with respect to each other so that the black one would peek through the front one and would separate it a little bit from the background. At this point, everything was ready and I could actually start assembling the card. I used some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to glue down the front panel to the purple background. I am going to trim off the excess using my scissors, and then I can go ahead and start adhering the bunnies. To make sure that they would be at the same distance from each other and that they would be nicely centered with respect to the card, I started by adhering the central bunny first. I then glued down the ones at the edges of the card, and finally I filled in the gaps with the 2 remaining bunnies. And this way I have a nice and tidy row of bunnies at the bottom of my card. The sentiment on the card reads Easter Wishes, and I stamped the word wishes on some black cardstock using Versamark ink because I wanted to do some heat embossing with white embossing powder. I am using a paintbrush to remove any stray particles of embossing powder that were sticking where I didn't want them to, and then I could melt the embossing powder with my heat gun. And this sentiment, by the way, is part of the Easter Wishes stamp set by SugarPea Designs. To create a banner around the sentiment, I used one of the dies in the Enjoy tag set by SugarPea Designs. I ran it through my die cutting machine once, and then I rotated my die, I positioned around the sentiment and ran everything through my die cutting machine again to obtain a tiny banner with flag ends on both sides. I used Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to adhere both the sentiment banner and the die cut word Easter on the front of my card. I will have the die cut word Easter centered with respect to the card and the little sentiment banner a little bit shifted to the side to create a bit of interest. And at this point my card front was almost ready, so I could go ahead and adhere it to a top folding A2 card base that I created out of some white cardstock. And then I decided to decorate the inside of the card by stamping the bunny from the Easter Wishes stamp set with Distress Oxide in pumice stone, and I also added another of the sentiments from the Easter Wishes stamp set by stamping it with Black Soot Distress Oxide. The very last step that completed this card was to add some Nuvo drops to the front of the card, and these are Nuvo Crystal drops in the color bottle green. And here you can see the final result. Really elegant and delicate thanks to the soft color palette and those gorgeous die cuts. And that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the SugarPea Designs channel for more inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.